Hey guys, in today's video, get ready for a story that will change your worldview. Thorne Abernathy, at age 20, had a near-death experience where he discovered that the reality we know is just an illusion. The revelations he received from the being of light will leave you speechless. So, leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any details. Get ready for this transformative journey. My name is Thorne Abernathy, and today I want to share an experience that completely transformed my understanding of life, death, and love. I was just 20 years old when it happened, on a seemingly ordinary night in the town of Eldridge, where I grew up. He was young, full of dreams and internal conflicts, like anyone at that age. I grew up in a home marked by constant tension. My father, David Tiaz, was always a rigid man, seemingly incapable of showing affection, trapped in his own pain and limitations. My mother, Clara, did her best to keep the peace in our home, but she didn't always succeed. In this environment, I learned from an early age to seek refuge in music and art, which became my escape valves amid the emotional chaos that surrounded me. Before the event that changed my life, I was like a spectator in my own existence, always watching life pass by but never truly feeling a part of it. The difficult relationship with my father had created emotional barriers that I didn't know how to overcome. Our home, which should be a place of welcome and love, often felt like an emotional prison where silence weighed as much as unspoken words. I decided to share this story not just as an account of an extraordinary experience, but as a testimony of transformation and hope. What happened that night in Eldridge was not just a near-death experience, it was an awakening to a new way of understanding existence or love and the bonds that bind us to one another. I was never a particularly religious or spiritual person before this event. Like many young people, he was more concerned with the practical issues of life than with reflections on existence or death. But that night changed everything. And today I feel the need to share every detail of this extraordinary experience, in the hope that it can help others understand that there is much more to our existence than we can see or touch. It was an ordinary night in Eldridge, one of those that seems destined to pass without leaving a mark on the memory. The air was heavy inside the house, not only because of the physical atmosphere, but mainly because of the emotional tension that seemed to permeate every room. I had spent the day trying to avoid confrontation, as I usually did, taking refuge in my room on the second floor, where I felt safer. That night, I went to bed early, exhausted from the daily emotional battles I fought in silence. My room, decorated with band posters and drawings I had made myself, was my personal sanctuary. What I didn't know was that a gas leak in the kitchen would turn this refuge into a silent trap. The hours passed, and while I slept, the gas filled the house, silently rising to my room. It was an invisible and deadly invader, which little by little took over the air I breathed. There were no signs of danger, no alarms to alert me to what was happening. Sleep, which was supposed to be a time of rest and recovery, was becoming a gateway to something much deeper. At some point in the morning, my body began to react to the lack of oxygen. It was a confusing and disoriented awakening. My limbs felt heavy, as if they were bound by invisible chains. My mind struggled to comprehend what was happening, but the thought was cloudy, as if I were navigating through a dense fog. In a last instinctive effort to survive, I managed to roll out of bed. The fall was short, but the impact with the ground was enough to make me lose consciousness. It was at this moment that the experience truly began. A journey that would take me far beyond the limits of what I believed possible, far beyond the physical reality I knew. The moment of transition was surreal. When my body hit the ground, something extraordinary happened. Instead of feeling pain, I experienced a feeling of absolute liberation. Suddenly, I was floating above my own body, observing the scene like a privileged spectator. I saw my physical body lying on the ground, looking like a stringless puppet, while I, in my new form, hovered above, free from any physical limitations. The reality I had always known began to reveal itself as a mere illusion, a surface layer of something much deeper and more meaningful. The colors around me became more vibrant, more vivid than I had ever noticed before. Every object in the room seemed to emanate its own light, its own energy. It was as if, for the first time, he was truly awake and could see the world in its entirety. In this state, all the worries and fears that tormented me in physical life seemed insignificant. The weight of expectations, family conflicts, insecurities, all of this dissolved into a deeper understanding of existence. I felt connected to something bigger, something that transcended my individual existence. The sensation was one of absolute mental clarity. I could perceive every detail of the environment with extraordinary precision, as if my senses had been magnified thousands of times. Time seemed to no longer exist as we know it. Each moment expanded infinitely, allowing me to absorb and understand everything around me with a depth impossible in our normal experience. It was in that moment of expanded consciousness that I realized that what we call reality is just a tiny fraction of something much larger. The separation we feel from each other, the emotional isolation we experience, it all began to feel like an illusion created by our physical and mental limitations. For the first time, I understood that we are all part of an infinite web of connections, a network of consciousness that transcends our everyday understanding. It was then that I noticed something extraordinary appearing in the corner of my room. An intense and fascinating light began to manifest. It was no ordinary light. It had a conical shape, like a celestial spotlight that not only illuminated the environment, but seemed to penetrate my very essence. This light had a unique quality that is difficult to describe in earthly words. It was alive, pulsating, conscious. As the light intensified, I felt an irresistible force drawing me toward it. It was no ordinary physical attraction, but something that touched the very essence of my being. At the edge of this light, a form began to materialize, a being of pure energy that emanated an indescribable wisdom and tranquility. His presence brought a peace I had never experienced in my entire life. This being of light communicated with me, not through spoken words, but through a form of direct transmission of thoughts and feelings. "Come," was the message I received. "It is safe to advance." The voice, if I can call it that, carried a certainty and unconditional love that dispelled any fear or hesitation I might have had. The light wasn't just bright. She carried within her an intelligence, a consciousness that seemed to understand every aspect of my being. It was as if every particle of this light was composed of pure knowledge and love. As I got closer, I could feel that I was about to access a fundamental truth about existence, something that has always been there, but that our limited consciousness cannot normally perceive. At that moment, I understood that I was facing something sacred, something that transcended any religious or spiritual concept I had ever known. Light did not represent a specific religion or set of beliefs. It was the very essence of existence, the primordial source of all consciousness. It was as if all the knowledge of the universe was concentrated in that luminous beam, inviting me to be part of something infinitely greater than my individual existence. As I moved toward the light, an indescribable feeling of euphoria took over my being. It was as if each step towards that luminous dimension brought me closer to a state of absolute completeness. It felt like coming home, not to a physical home, but to a place of universal belonging that transcended any earthly concept of home. All the fears and anxieties that haunted me in my physical life began to dissipate like fog in the morning sun. The worries that seemed so important, the family conflicts, the uncertainties about the future, the emotional pain accumulated over the years, all dissolved into a greater understanding of the meaning of existence. With each moment spent in this state, the feeling of fullness intensified. It was as if every cell of my being vibrated at a frequency of pure joy. The being of light continued to encourage me, and I could feel that I was about to discover the true purpose of existence. The reality I knew before now seemed just a pale reflection of this transcendental experience. In this state of expanded consciousness, I began to understand that love was not just a feeling, but the very force that holds the universe together. Each movement toward the light brought with it profound revelations about the nature of reality. It was as if I was discovering that my entire previous life had been just a prelude to this moment of spiritual awakening. The being of light continued to guide me, and his presence radiated an understanding that went beyond words. I felt that I was about to cross a threshold into a completely new dimension of existence, where all the questions that tormented me would find their answers in the purest simplicity of being. It was in this moment of supreme ecstasy that something unexpected happened. As I looked down, I saw my father, David, enter the room in despair. The scene I witnessed broke my heart. He held my limp body in his arms, crying out for help with an intensity I had never witnessed before. Seeing my father, that man always so rigid and restrained, showing such vulnerability and love, caused a deep conflict in me. For the first time in my life, I could see beyond the mask of sternness he always maintained. In his eyes there was a pure and desperate love, a father's love that I always doubted existed. The contrast between the absolute peace I felt in the light and the anguish evident on my father's face created a tension in my being. On the one hand, the pull of the light was almost irresistible, promising complete freedom from all earthly pains and limitations. On the other, the desire to return and rebuild my relationship with my father began to grow within me. At that crucial moment, I understood that there was still a lot to be experienced and learned on my earthly journey. The love I saw in my father's eyes revealed that our story was not finished. There were still important chapters to be written. In an act of deep vulnerability and love, I approached the being of light, asking for permission to return. The decision was not easy. The peace and completeness I felt were indescribable, but the call of earthly love, even with all its imperfections and challenges, spoke louder. I realized that sometimes true spiritual growth is not in transcending physical existence, but in finding meaning and love in the complexities of human life. The moment of return was as intense as the departure. In an instant, I felt as if a powerful magnetic force was pulling me back into my physical body. The transition was sudden and overwhelming, as if every atom of my being was being reorganized and reconnected to material reality. I woke up on the floor of my room, surrounded by paramedics who were working hard to revive me. Each breath felt new and different, like I was learning how to use my body again. The sounds, the colors, the sensations, everything seemed both familiar and strange at the same time. It was like I was seeing the world through a completely new lens. The sensation of returning to the physical body was disconcerting. Part of me was still floating between dimensions, trying to process the intensity of the experience I had just experienced. The worried faces around me seemed distant, as if they were separated from me by an invisible veil. The paramedics' voices sounded distorted, as if they were coming from far away. My father was there, holding my hand with a strength that conveyed all his fear and love. His eyes, normally hard and distant, were now filled with tears. I wanted to tell him that everything was okay, that I had experienced something extraordinary, but my voice still wouldn't respond to my commands. The return to physical consciousness was gradual. Every bodily sensation felt amplified. The air rushing into my lungs, the beating of my heart, even the slightest movement caused an avalanche of sensations. It was as if my body was hypersensitive, adapting to material reality again. The days that followed were a period of profound adaptation. The world seemed different, not just in its physical appearance, but in its essence. Each moment carried new meaning, a depth I had never realized before. I tried to share my experience with friends and family, but I soon realized that words were insufficient to describe what I had experienced. Most people reacted with polite skepticism. Some suggested it was just a hallucination caused by lack of oxygen. Others listened with polite interest, but it was clear they couldn't really understand. How to explain colors to someone who has never seen them? How to describe an experience that transcends language itself? Still, I knew my life had been irrevocably transformed. Physical reality, which had previously seemed so solid and definitive, now revealed itself as just a fraction of something infinitely larger. Every interaction, every moment, every breath carried with it a new awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. I began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way the light danced through the leaves of the trees, the rhythm of conversations, the small gestures of kindness between people. It was as if he had gained a new form of perception that went beyond the conventional five senses. The skepticism of others no longer bothered me as much as it used to. I had experienced something that was beyond the need for external validation. The certainty of the experience was engraved not just in my memory, but in every fiber of my being. As time passed, my understanding of God and spirituality underwent a profound transformation. The awareness I experienced during my near-death experience transcended any traditional religious concept. I discovered that God was not a singular and distant figure, as many religions portray, but a connective force present in everything and everyone. This new realization completely challenged everything I had previously learned about spirituality. It was a vision that went beyond doctrines and dogmas, beyond established rituals and rules. The divine has revealed itself as a unifying essence, an energy that permeates all existence and connects all souls in an infinite web of consciousness. The peace I found in this new understanding was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was not a peace based on religious beliefs or practices, but a deep understanding of the interconnected nature of all existence. Life after death, once an abstract and frightening concept, has become a natural continuation of being, a transformation rather than an end. This new perspective completely changed my way of seeing different religions and beliefs. I realized that each spiritual tradition captured a fragment of this greater truth, like different windows looking into the same infinite garden. The divergences between religions now seemed less important than their fundamental similarities. Love, which I experienced in its purest form during my experience, revealed itself as the true essence of this universal force. It was not just a human feeling, but the very energy that holds the universe together, that connects us to each other and to the whole. The process of transformation that followed my experience began at home in Eldridge with rebuilding my relationship with my father. Our dialogues, once marked by uncomfortable silences and unresolved tensions, began to flow in a new way. Each conversation became an opportunity for healing, a chance to build bridges across the chasm that had separated us for so long. This healing process was not easy or immediate. It required patience, vulnerability, and a willingness on both sides to change deeply rooted patterns. But the understanding I gained during my near-death experience gave me the strength and perspective I needed to persist on this journey of reconciliation. The transformation extended beyond the family circle. I began to see each interaction as an opportunity to share not only my experience, but also the love and understanding that derived from it. I realized that my story wasn't just mine. It was a testament to the deep interconnectedness that exists between us all. I learned that life is like a complex tapestry, where each thread represents a connection, a relationship, a moment of learning. Each experience, each encounter, each challenge has its role in the great web of existence. True freedom, I discovered, lies not in transcending our humanity, but in embracing it completely, with all its imperfections and possibilities. Today, I continue my journey with renewed purpose. I share my story not to convince, but to inspire others to explore their own connections to the divine, the universe, and each other. Because in the end I understood that we are all part of a much larger collective consciousness, united by bonds that transcend our limited understanding of reality. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.